afternoon, everyone. And first off, thank you to Scott, Angus Australia, and the whole team for inviting me up here. It's been pre-COVID since I've had an opportunity to come out and speak in front of producer groups like yourselves, who I don't get to see enough recently. So certainly welcome to the chance to speak to you today, and look forward to any questions you have that I can try and field after the presentation's completed. And to start off with, so it's a bit of a mouthful as a presentation topic, and the whole joy of eating and where does that come from. And I think the purpose for having me in this presentation is around remembering what we're doing. So the joy of eating is our cornerstone motto for our business in Australia for NH Foods. It's what we're all about, and everything that we do is to drive the joy of eating to our consumers, our customers, and around the world. I think everyone can understand that if you go back and think of the enjoyable memories and holidays and all those different occasions in your life, most of those are centred around food, either across the table. If you think about what do you do on Australia Day, automatically you know what you're going to put on the barbecue. If you think about Christmas, you know what you're roasting. If you think about Father's Day, Mother's Day, every other event in the calendar, it all comes back to food and sharing around the table. And so for our company, the joy of eating became central to that. And I think that's fundamental to most of us here. So to go back, I guess, on the journey of the joy of eating, I've had the privilege of working for NH Foods for just over 20 years now. When I started in the early 2000s, like most meat processing companies, it was about efficiency, yield, volume, putting stuff in a box, moving around the world as a commodity to a range of different markets who pay you the best price on a trading day. Much of that still remains, but the focus has changed, and you've seen that through the development of brands and the communication to the customer. So over those 20 years, we've seen the evolution of what is our business for? And that's where this discussion point of the joy of eating. So then we suddenly had to refocus our business. If we're all about creating the joy of eating, what are we doing in our business every day to develop that? When you find that, okay, so what are we doing in our feedlot to generate the best outcome so we've got the best eating quality and the most humanely produced animals? What are we doing at our abattoirs for the greatest outcomes in food safety? What are we doing in our export and logistics channels to make sure products are in the right place at the right time? What are we doing in our value-added businesses around the world to put that on a plate in a way that the consumers are interested in? Not just the same thing every week, but a variety of meats, different price points, all these different things that we believe comes back to the joy of eating. And underlying all of that is what drives our businesses and our commercial returns, because consumers who enjoy product will spend money on it. That's the money that goes back. So when you're looking at these great presentations before about how you can achieve through science on your properties the better outcomes and all those grading for meat assurance and meat eating qualities, it's because people are going to pay that money. That's why you're doing those activities, to create a product that people want to buy. So that's what we're going to go through a bit, and that's where NH Foods is coming from. So probably good if I can work out the clickers okay. Just to run through who NH Foods is. So the business started in 1942, based out of Japan, and it was a family ham and sausage company. It's come a fair way since then, but a lot of the family-based morals and concerns have remained the same. At the moment, the business is listed on the Japanese stock exchange, so if you feel like buying shares, certainly do so. And we're based in 19 countries around the world, around 25,000 staff, between there and 30,000 at any one time, and around 90 different processing factories, facilities and distribution centres around the world. Core is obviously in Japan, Japan being Australia's largest market for beef at this point in time, and about 25% market share of all protein in Japan is purchased through NH Foods group of companies. So the map there is a fairly artistic view of what the world might look like, but it gives you a range idea of the different countries we're in, predominantly Asia-centric, but across Europe, North America, South America, and the Middle East. As I talked about before, it's all about that joy of eating and what we're delivering to the customer. So we're buying Australian product, we're one of them. They also purchase from a range of other processors here in Australia for both beef, sheep meat, etc. And they're turning those into ready-made meals and takeaway foods that are bought across the retail chains all across Japan. This is just an example of one. The top right one, if you're very good at Japanese, you'll pick up it means a mugigyu, which is barley beef. So they're using a program out of Australia, out of a whaler feedlot, and that's using that. A lot of those cattle are purchasing from programs that you guys are producing under. So what do we do in NH Foods Australia? So we're the subsidiary, obviously, of our parent company. In Australia, we're 100% focused on beef. The rest of the world, pork, chicken, seafood, vegetables, everything else we do. But in Australia, we're all about beef and beef only. So just starting at the top of the map, we've got Mackay, which is known as Thomas Borthwick and Sons. Oakey, which is surprisingly Oakey Beef Exports, another processing site, produces around 1,000 head a day of primarily heavy grain-fed product. And that's where our story today is mostly centred around. Whyalla Beef, who you would have had hopefully the pleasure of meeting up with Daryl and Libby, and I believe Ewan was here again yesterday as well. So hopefully you've met up with some of the team there and you're aware of the Bective feedlot that we're using, as well as Whyalla up near Texas in Queensland. Wingham's our beef processing site just out of Taree there, and Sydney is where head office is. King Island makes the map because that's where our backgrounding and breeding and genetics programs are ideally positioned. It was determined for that clean, green, unaffected area to do our research and testing based off. As I said before, NH Foods probably in the past has been fairly hidden behind what was a local company name. So you would have seen Whyalla Beef, you would have seen the Oakey Beef Exports logo. You probably in New South Wales wouldn't have seen the Borthwick's logo as much. And the Wingham Beef Exports one you're probably used to as well. But all these brands have been owned since the early 80s, effectively, and through the early 90s by NH Foods Australia. And bit by bit now we're getting more conscious of making people aware that all this is one group and we're all working together as a vertically integrated company. So as I said, 3 beef processing sites. We're doing around 8,000 to 10,000 head a week of cattle across all different grades. And the feedlot there at Whyalla currently undergoing expansion to around 75,000 head on feed there, all grain cattle, and aside from a little bit of Wagyu, just about everything's Angus cattle there as well. So, as I said, you are our target market for buying cattle, and we're hopefully your target customer. So, what's Angus Reserve? And this is the brand that we've developed, and we've been supported by and supporting with Angus Australia. It's our largest program that we do. So you may have seen this at retail, and I'll come to some of those later on. But effectively, it's a 150-day grain-fed program based on a marble score 2+. Again, why the attribute scales and the genetic outcomes is so important to us. So Australia's largest verified Black Angus Beef program. So we're doing between 1,500 and 2,000 head a week under that program, all through our Whyalla feedlot. As I said, vertically integrated production. So you guys are the start of what we're looking to do. That's why we're working with you guys and keen to understand your business so that we can work it into ours, putting it through our Whyalla feedlot and then on to our Oakey Beef Exports before it gets exported to our various sites and companies around the world. As we'll talk on later on, there's various iterations around our Angus Reserve that's been somewhat enforced because of various market access rules and requirements. So China we'll touch on later on in terms of what we can do to access those markets. The EU and the UK is a little bit different, and we'll go through those later on. So there is a variety of Angus Reserves you might see out there and see some slight differences, but unless you're speaking Chinese, you probably won't pick up too much of the differences between the brochures and the logos, but there are some slight changes I'll cover off later on. But just because you've all had a nice lunch, and this is the first time of the day to try and talk to people because it's nap time, I've got a couple of videos here. The first one's just to show you our Whyalla feedlot and gives you a bit of a feeling for the joy of eating and that concept within our business. So I think that hopefully gives you a bit of an insight of what I was trying to communicate before, and the guys at Whale will kill me for putting that up with all their slow motion turns to camera at the end, but they're not here to kill me, so it's all right. But all that work that's done at Whaler, as I said, feeding for 150 days on specially designed grain-fed rations, predominantly around a barley style feed, is led into our Okie beef exports processing room and graded out to all those levels that we're looking to do to be called Angus Reserve internally, meet standards Australia graded. We've had won before awards on our Angus Reserve as the highest scoring one out of our Bective feedlot just up the road. But the key person and people that matter after that is our customers. So what you can see here is an example of the meat department at Costco. We're quite proud at this point that the meat department is all supplied through NH Foods Australia, and it's all Angus that they buy. There's a tiny part of Wagyu that they also purchase from us, but their base product is an Angus Reserve product. It's, from my point of view, the best product you'll buy at a supermarket in Australia, hands down, and at a reasonable price point. So for over a decade now, they've been buying that product, and they swear by it, and they're a keen endorser of that product. So why did we move across, and what did they see as well as us about becoming Verified Black Angus partners? The key part was third-party verification. So some people don't trust me, that's okay. I'm a salesman, a bit of a shyster sometimes, but they have a great trust in Angus Australia, and not just here but around the world with our customers. They see the standards that they're employing, the methods that they employ, and inspecting and visiting on sites and keeping us accountable for what we're doing. And that's part of what we want to do. We want to be transparent. We want to communicate to others that there's integrity in that. So that point of differentiation we talked about, there's plenty of American product out there as CAB. It's a 51% standard program. There's others in Australia that are producing Angus or black programs, ebony. There's a lot of creative words around dark colours and what that might mean. I think it's not disparaging on any of those at all. I think what we've seen as our point of difference, though, is we're saying we're a verified Black Angus program. And the reason we're happy with that as well is it gives us a quality outcome we're looking for. The cattle that we've been buying under that verified program are the ones that we want to be putting through our feedlot. They're the ones that are performing. They're the ones that are getting the eating quality outcomes that customers want. So we're keen to continue from that point of view and continue to grow. As I said, at the moment we're 1,500 head, but we'd like to be double that within a not too far future, without being specific on dates. But also that last part there, which is that focus on integrity. So customers has to believe what you're talking about. You only get one chance to fail, and they'll walk away and try someone else. You don't get a second chance to say that you can act with integrity. So for us, having an independent person keeping us honest and questioning us when we need to is good, and it gives them the credibility across the whole program. So food service, as I said, Costco is a keen supporter of this program. You can certainly go in there and see the Angus Reserve branded product all over the shelves. I put a no-name burger there, but you might be able to work out a classic Angus burger, where that might be from. I think you've had Matt Toll presenting earlier about the McDonald's programs and Angus. So they're an example of in Australia where the product ends up in. And as well as that, we've been pleasured to work with RMAC on going to Parliament House over the last few years to do promotion for Friends of the Red Meat in Canberra, and to get the politicians outside. We do a barbecue cook to get them all out there and getting their hands on some Aussie beef. I think it was talked about, with Beef Australia and Beef Week, that we want to try and get people who make massive decisions about the future of our industry to understand more about what we're actually doing, and so we're keen supporters of that. So if you can sit there in Canberra and get them all to have a bit of a talk while they're having some lunch, and also bring in a bit of joy of eating, they're all happy and smiling for once, but that's what we're keen to do as well. So when we talk about how can we communicate with our customers about the Angus Reserve story, about the joy of eating, there's a lot of pathways, a lot of noise to try and communicate directly with customers. Our objective is to get as close as we can. As I said before, we've talked on the Costco angle, but in store they're keen for us to work with. They know we're the product experts, and so we're allowed to produce some in-store marketing that we do for them. And here's a couple of examples. I've done a few videos just because I know I can be testing at this time of day. But one of our celebrity chefs we use is Fast Ed. You probably know from Better Homes and Gardens and those different things. He's a tireless campaigner around our Angus Reserve and also the beef industry. But if I could try and get this one to play things.
Angus Reserve Black Angus Beef is the best beef you'll find anywhere in Australia. It's succulent and delicious. And if you want to spoil your family at Christmas or any time of the year, grab one of these. It's an OP rib roast. And don't worry, it's easier to cook than you might imagine. You just start it fast, then a long, slow bake. The results are incredible. After all, it's Angus Reserve Black Angus Beef.
And so the other issue, I'm not sure if you've all been to a Costco, but I'm sure you'll all rush in now and support them because they're supporting Angus so heavily, is they do sell primals and their focus is on selling whole cryovac bags of primals. They do portion, which we saw in some of those shelf photos I put there, but they really like to sell cryovac product. And the issue for most city folk is, what do they do with that? They get this scary piece of 5-6 kilos of product. Their oven's this wide, they're not quite sure. So the idea that they challenged us with is to do some bits and pieces on TV to encourage people to get better value by buying primals instead of portion cut, but also being able to use it once they get home. And this, again, just another quick example of it.
The best way and the best value way to enjoy great Australian beef is to grab yourself a whole piece. Of course, I'm talking about Angus Reserve. Portioning it couldn't be easier. With a long, sharp knife, you simply cut yourself steaks, roast, stir fry, or even kebabs. And there's a million delicious ways to enjoy it. This is just one of my favourites. Angus Reserve strip loin, it really is Australia's very best beef, and it's available right here at Costco.
So again, hopefully that gives you the message we're trying to give to customers is about being able to make use of this product and be able to be engaged in that process as much as they can. So as well as Australia, let's be honest, 75% of Australia's product goes export. Angus Reserve's no different in that space. The key fundamental behind these programs is, yes, there's a great opportunity in Australia for a range of Western style cuts, but if we're looking to maximise the value of our carcass so that we can in turn pay the best money to secure the cattle for our business, is about yield across the animal. Wagyu at the moment is the benchmark. So if you walk around the world and say, would you like to buy Wagyu cuts? Yes, everyone knows that. You can turn around and sell Wagyu leg bones, Wagyu fat, Wagyu everything, Wagyu intestines. What we're wanting to try and do with Angus is continue to push that needle as well, because the more products you can get under that umbrella as a premium for Angus, overall it's more money that's coming in. So what we're seeing across the rest of the world is obviously their diets are very different, so you can use a greater range of cuts. And over time, while we were a domestic-centric brand to start with, again, overseas has become our largest market for this. So the key part we're trying to communicate, but it is difficult overseas, is that MSA grading. A lot of people get lost in the science. So we've changed the messaging around that, saying eating quality guaranteed, and that's an easier system for them to work through. They just say it's going to be good. We give them the same product each time, and that assurance is all they need. As I said, most of our markets are working on that Marble Score 2+ product. So if we look at, for example, Indonesia is a great one if you're looking for yield and returns. They predominantly will eat most of the carcass that we'll turn up our nose and walk away from. And what might be a cheap product of $1 or $2 a kilo sounds like it's chicken feed and not really of importance, but the yield you get off all these carcasses when you're doing a couple of thousand head a week adds up quickly into the hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in extra value. So these type of markets, Indonesia, Korea, China, Japan, Taiwan, USA, and across Europe is our key area to try and drive that yield efficiency. So we look at Angus Reserve worldwide. So as I talked about before, unfortunately, not everyone is exactly at the same standard. There's lots of different barriers to entry across different markets for various reasons, whether it's sanitary controls or whether it's simply traditional tariff and quota barriers we've seen in the case of the EU and the UK. But starting off with China, everyone's probably well aware of the challenges that Australia has had over the last 5 or 6 years in that space. Fortunately, all 3 of my sites are China accessible, but it does mean the product has to be frozen. So when you're trying to talk to someone about saying, here's an ultra-grade premium product straight out of your freezer, it doesn't really match with how we would normally associate high-end product. So with the China product, we've increased the days on feed. It goes to a 200-day program. Because it's China, we can no longer use hormones, so we take the hormones out. The combination of those two effects will naturally increase the marble score, which is good. With China, they're actually looking for marbling as the #1 differentiator for value, predominantly because they're used to looking for Japanese Wagyu and associating that with high returns. They're certainly not paying us anywhere near that price, but they're looking visually at the product and seeing that's what value does. So for China, we've tweaked it up a couple of notches. So as I said, normally we MB2. For China, our worst is MB3, and most of it sits above MB5 in that space. And the change goes from a retail focus to a food service focus. So most of that will be for yakiniku-style Japanese grill restaurants throughout China. The EU and the UK is slightly different again because of the rules that have, and I'll get to some of the changes maybe in the future, but the presiding rules at the moment have been around dentition. So anything less than 4 teeth gets the 0% tariff. Anything over gets 20% tariff. 0 to 2 is 0, 2 to 4%, 20%. Anything over that it goes even. It's non-commercial. So effectively, everyone's trying to work on a young animal in that space. So what we found was we had to pull back on the days on feed, just so we didn't have anything fall out. Also, because of the rules into Europe, it's hormone-free. So again, that product, because it's no hormone, the marbling is still quite good in that 2+ pace, but the days on feed mean it's not going to be the same as the China program. But as I think everyone's been reading in the media of recent, there's a change afoot. So the UK free trade agreement kicks off from the start of next month. Effectively, anything in a container now will be arriving after that free trade deal's in place. So the change in that space where there's no longer a focus on dentition means an animal can be any age, which opens up long-fed programs, obviously, as an easier way to target the high-end markets in those countries and allow us to maybe shift our positioning a little in this space. The EU negotiations rumble on, but again, we'll see what the objectives are in that space. But for us, we'd love to have a standard product, but globally we have to tailor our product across the regulations to be able to get product in there. So global trends, some are really clear and obvious, we've talked about for a few years, and some are really emerging over the last 6 to 12 months as we've seen economies start to change. So the first one, buyers are looking for value. That's a post-COVID change that we've seen. So during COVID, people were happy to spend money. It might not seem it, but when everyone was eating it stuck at home, they all of a sudden found an extra level of their wallet that had all the cash in it that they were happy to part with, and that flowed through for everyone. We saw that in livestock prices as well. But the world has much changed at this moment in time. Everyone's starting to look at what they're spending it on. And it's not saying they won't spend money on things that are of high value, but they want to, high cost, but they want to associate them with a high value outcome. So they want to buy things that they know that they think they're still getting a good deal for, but they're not going to go and splurge like they were. And it's slowly starting in other parts of the world. It's slowly starting here as well, but the expectation is that will rumble on in the next 12 to 18 months. That's going to be much more of a feature that we're seeing as some of the interest rates and other economic conditions start to change buying patterns. So we see Angus Reserve as adding that value. We go back to those videos about trying to sell primals, which are a cheaper price point than portion cut. People can do it at home, they can split it up with their families, all those different things. So we continue to think that their Angus programs in those areas will continue to add value and drive people to make those consistent decisions. The one that's been burning for a long while now, since COVID, is people want to know more about their food. Everyone's taking a lot more interest, they're doing a lot more home cooking, they want to know all the provenance, they want to know the story. We've seen it ourselves with all our social media, everyone's asking more questions, they want to know what's happening, they want to post how good they are about cooking things, and I'm sure everyone's been guilty of that from time to time. But the question to us now is we have to be much more transparent. Where's it coming from? What are we doing? We're happy with that. We've got nothing to hide in that space, so we think it's a healthy thing and a healthy trend that will continue. An example on the right is what we're putting in our social media. So we'll have little finder words for this one's aimed more towards the younger age group, because educating children is where the journey begins. But we're putting those things in there so they can associate things like iron, energy, etc. with beef and Angus Reserve in particular. Third one down becomes structural changes in traditional markets, and this is one that we don't really know how it's going to pan out. We know that Japan's been a large market for Australian beef for a long time. We know it's one of the world's quickest ageing populations and declining populations moving forward. So it's likely that they've already reached maximum purchasing conditions. In some ways, people are seeing that they will probably have to have a declining outcome towards the future as the rest of Asia, which has an increasing population boom, starts to chip away at what would be our traditional markets. So the real focus for us at the moment is to spread as wide as we can. We're working currently to 44 different countries around the world. Angus Reserve, I would hazard a guess, it's probably one of the most widely distributed products in the world, anywhere from Kazakhstan, Tunisia, all across Europe, South America, and all through Asia. I think just about every Asian country gets ticked off. So the strength for us is we know that Australia represents around 2% of total beef or bovine production globally. We're not looking to be the biggest and the cheapest and the most efficient in every market. We're looking to find the niches who really want to pay that premium for all the call-outs that Australia is going to provide. And I'll get to that with social licence later on, because our journey is only going to get more tough in terms of what people are going to be expecting for us. So that structural change means that we're going to be looking at pivoting from traditional markets that sort of already know our product to new markets that are learning about our product at the same speed they're learning from Brazil or USA and others, as beef becomes more of their diet as they hit income thresholds, normally around 35,000 US. That means they can start to look at moving away from a wet market to actually going to a supermarket and buying something that might not get them sick. If you look at the increased ease of preparation, again, this is going to not dissipate everyone's time poor. We went through some of those earlier solutions we're providing in Japan. Traditionally, Australia's had more fresh food and less packaged, but more and more we're going to see retailers dominated by packaged food solutions. So in the case of us, yes, we're selling Angus Reserve cuts, but how have we prepped it? How have we marinated it? Have we already corned it? Have we sous vide it so it's already ready for a 15-minute cook in the oven when they get home from work while the kids are screaming at them to provide a family meal? So that area is continuing to grow, and that's a large part of our focus globally, is how can we make a range of various dinners, because it's great to come up with one solution. I think people go, we'll do some slow-cooked beef and we can pull that and put on a burger, and that's great. For the 10th time, though, people want to have that variety and they want to keep coming back to you. You've got to give them the challenge of what can we show you that's different next week to keep your home meals interesting. And as we talked on before, this weekend trend of the home chef continues unabated. So we're seeing on the weekend people are spending more time with their shop. They're spending more time considering what they're going to prepare and invite for people over, and they're going to look at a wider range of cuts so that they don't want to repeat the dish that they've done before. They want to look at using different parts of the animal. So again, great news when you think back to what drives their outcome is yield. So if we can get the consumers interested in a whole range of different things, prepared in a different way, show them how to cook it, that's what's going to start to change our valuation coming back in as well. ESG outcomes, I'm guessing that this has been covered a lot, and I heard some earlier commentary as well. Sustainability, carbon, all these different areas, whether you're for or against, remains the largest challenge that we're going to have to be looking for as an industry in the near future. So we have to continually be looking at what does the consumer want, rather than what the government legislates. We're looking at what does the consumer want and have to move our business in that space. So for us, we're actively investing in methane capture that we've already been doing for a long time, and actively looking to drop our carbon position. At the same time, understanding where the deforestation question is going to be going forward as well, because that's a hot topic that won't go away. But when we also talk about sustainability, it's about community sustainability. So we look at supporting the communities and regional towns, because that really hasn't been considered as well, and becoming a bit of a hot topic of people moving to the cities, or how do we grow our non-urban hubs. So all those areas we're trying to commit time and effort to support the growth where our sites are at this point, but overall in terms of regional community engagement. The last point here is a tricky one, and it's a challenge that this is the one that drives most of our industry looking for solutions, and that's the social licence to operate. So we all produce and raise cattle in Australia's operating situation. We have legislation and requirements that we have to jump through in Australia, and none of these are bad things, but we're then turning around and selling most of our products into countries that don't care any about what we're talking about. So animal welfare is a new concept to most of the areas we're talking to. Will they pay more for it? No, because it doesn't register on their radar. When you talk about carbon emissions to the rest of the world outside of North America, Europe and Australia, does anyone care? Not really. They're looking what price is the beef. So we have the challenge of having to operate a business in Australia and have a social licence to operate, which is true and correct, but then we have to try and invest that money to then get a return from overseas customers, who in most cases don't see that as adding value proposition to them. So part of that learning that as an industry we're going to have to do is to be explaining to those groups overseas why the things that we're doing matter for them and their community. And as their incomes grow, and it's no surprise that North America, Europe and Australia, as high income countries, start to care more about these questions rather than what can I afford to eat today. That's going to be the largest challenge we have, is connecting the social licence to operate in this country and our customers and what they're willing to pay over here. And those two differences are difficult to reconcile moving forward. So a lot of people ask me, the trend is carbon-free beef. It is if you're looking at the Australian solution, but if you're looking at globally, 95% of customers in the world don't mind. That's not their thing. They're just looking to say, is it safe and can I afford it? That's the overriding issue. So those things will continue to burn away. But I see that as an opportunity, not a challenge. As I said, we're not looking to sell the bulk range of product to every country. We're looking for that top niche within each area, within those high income brackets who can afford to eat Australian beef. And hopefully they're the ones that we can advise on those social licences, and they'll continue to purchase our product. So I know I've sort of covered a wide array of different areas from local and domestic, and happy to take any range of questions if you have it, especially regarding whether it's anything from the production, the feedlotting, the operating at the abattoirs, marketing here, marketing overseas, or a few different hats. As was alluded to, I currently chair the FTA task force for the red meat industry for the UK and EU, but also sit within a fair few other industry bodies. So if there's any discussion points you'd like to have, I'm your disposal. But thank you very much, and the opportunity to speak to you was great.